go live to London, where Arise correspondent Judita Dasilva joins us to discuss the election of the American Cardinal Robert Provost, now known as Pope Leo XIV. Good morning, Judita. Welcome to the program. Habemus Papam, we're celebrating this morning, aren't we, finally?
Indeed it is, and it's a surprise how quickly it happened. It's a surprise who was chosen, but actually now hearing the rumblings of kind of what happened in the lead up that everyone was very secretive about, it turns out that interviewing Robert Provost's, now Leo XIV's brother, he said in the first couple of days after Pope Francis's death, he was told that his brother was in the running, was one of the top three. When he spoke to his brother said, no, that's not true. And he pushed it away and just didn't want to hear about it. And so they left it. And there had always been discussions amongst us journalists and people like within the religious community that there could never be an American pope, because it seemed that America is such a dominant power economically and geopolitically. To give them that level of religious power as well would almost make them a monopoly socially and ideologically. So people always put the idea of an American pope to the side. But it turns out since he was like GCSE age 13, 14 in the 8th grade, he had known this was his calling, and he went to the seminary as soon as he graduated. Then he dedicated his life to service. The first time he met Pope Francis was when he was doing missionary work, where he got his training in Latin America. He was in Peru, Pope Francis was in Argentina. And, you know, the rest, as they say, is history.
Okay, Judita, the point you raised about politics, I think we should link it to President Trump, who had published an AI-generated image and even suggested that there is a very good cardinal in New York suggesting that if he did not become the Pope, which would have been impossible anyway, that maybe an American should become. Do you think that this secretive process that is steeped in tradition, that there may have been some infiltration of America first, politics in this? Do you believe that? Or you just think that it's a red herring?
I am a conspiracy theorist to an extent, because when you look at the history of the Catholic Church all the way back to ancient Rome, there has always been a uncomfortable symbiosis between church and state. I wouldn't put it past the powers that be having conversations with whoever happens to be their archbishop or their cardinal in their different dioceses about what would be best, but to actually exert that influence on the Vatican, I don't think they can. But what I think happened is there's been reports, particularly in the publication Politico, that the cardinals voting, because so many of them were new and hadn't done a conclave before, they watched the film Conclave that we covered on Arise Play during award season just to get an idea of the process. And I encourage people to watch it, because when you look at what happens in the film and look at what has happened now, you can see a synergy in the narrative with having Robert Provost end up being the winner. And I do know that he's seen as a progressive, even the fact that he took the name Leo XIV. When you look at Leo XIII, one of the most famous things he did was write this seminal work called Rerum Novarum. And what it was is that he was a pope during the Industrial Revolution, and he saw that the Industrial Revolution brought on capitalism. In a reaction to capitalism, it spurned socialism and communism. And so he wrote this work about the duties of capital versus labor, and it was seen as an extremely progressive work, which is indicative that this too might be a progressive pope. But it's yet to be seen, because another thing I would say is that the process of actually being elected, first, when you get the majority, the first thing they do is ask you, will you take the job? As soon as you say yes, you become the Supreme Pontiff. Then there's a prayer, and then you're led to the Room of Tears, a small room next to the Sistine Chapel. And there is laid out the cassock and the red mozzetta. Pope Francis did not wear the red mozzetta because he was a Franciscan who had a very stripped down mentality. He didn't live in the Apostolic Palace. He lived in the Casa Santa Marta, which has more humble residences, a bed, a chair, a desk. He dined with the nuns who serviced the Casa Santa Marta. He drove a simple car. He didn't go around in the Vatican helicopter. People said, should the new Pope come out in the cassock and the red mozzetta. It might be him dialing back to the traditions of the kind of pomp and pageantry of the papacy, which is what a lot of the conservative popes wanted, because they didn't like that humility that was being ascribed to the papal position, which shows that rather than progressive, he might be moderate, which is exactly why he might have won, because he's going to appease the conservatives and the progressive by lying somewhere in the middle. Like they say in politics, you lobby from the left or right, but you win from the center.
Okay, so you can call it a centrist pope. And it's also very symbolic because since Pope John Paul II in 1978, this is another non-Italian pope. Prior to Pope John Paul, for over 400 years, since the 1500s, it was all Italian popes until Pope John Paul II. That's also symbolic. Is it symbolic of the fact that the church is shifting? And you talked about you liking a little bit of conspiracy theory. Judita, let me play with you this morning. Forbes is reporting something really interesting. The maternal side of Pope Leo XVI can be traced back to the 1840s among the free people of color in New Orleans, according to Jared C. Honorer, a geologist with historical New Orleans collection research documentation. In fact, they say Rep. Troy Carter, who represents New Orleans, also presented a statement on Thursday highlighting Pope Leo XIV's ancestry ties to Creole and Haitian families, saying he was proud as a black man and a proud son of New Orleans.
Okay, I love that. Okay, so first things first. Oh, this is so exciting. Yay. So when you look at both of them, Pope Francis and Pope Leo, they weren't assigned to a diocese. They were part of They were friars and orders. Francis was a Jesuit with the Society of Jesus, and Leo was with the Order of St. Augustine. All the work he's done as a missionary in Peru, and since he took orders, is he's worked very much with the underserved, with the disenfranchised, with the poor. So when you look at what you've just said about his origins, it's very in tune with the kind of way he's programmed as a man, as a human being. He gravitates to those who are disenfranchised. He gravitates to those who are in need. That is probably how he won the progressives, because they see him as a person who will speak for those who are the voiceless. And with his background, knowing that first he's an American, and of all places to come from, he comes from Chicago. If you know Chicago, you know the racial tensions and the fracture lines societally that exist in Chicago. So he is that kind of American. He worked in Latin America. We see the kind of political fractions between Latin America and America in Trump's MAGA era. He is the kind of American Pope they would want, because they probably think he's the kind of religious leader that could speak to the ego of someone like Trump. He's American, they have a connection, but he thinks with the mentality of a minority. So he could give him the ideological steering that would be a symbiosis with the church. So I do think that, I do play into all those conspiracies that they might have some roots in reality.
All right. Well, we continue to watch this as several reactions will be unfolding from every single side of society. But Judita, it's such a pleasure hearing from you, such professional reporting. Thank you so much for your coverage on this issue.